Hey, this week's episode's a cool one because I'm going to talk about the elections. Now, there's going to be deep convictions about who you vote for and why you vote, but then there's these peripheral stories that maybe aren't as relevant, but they'll be talked about, namely like taxes and Social Security. So important stuff because it affects your future. So I want to help you think about what that might look like in your life personally, but they're, again, peripheral issues that will be debated in this upcoming election that you should pay attention to. So enjoy, and remember, you think different when you think long term. Have a great day.
Obviously, we don't have oftentimes the candidates we want, but with what we've got to think through that lens of good judgment, good values. And when we hear these four issues, they are subplots of other bigger issues, but one that we need to pay attention to for personal planning.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Darryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Darryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of PAX Financial Group. Thanks for tuning in to Retire in Texas. This information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. So I'm going to talk a lot of election stuff this 2024, and I want to make sure I kind of get your head working in the right way. We're going to have a lot of noise, and we need to get in front of that, have a preemptive strike on that noise. Let me share a phrase that you just need to be aware of whenever you hear it, because I've been reading a lot on tax issues lately. And the phrase that you're going to hear a lot of is fair share. What happens is if there's a problem that needs to be resolved, namely government debt, but also other problems. When we're going to talk about Social Security, Medicare, you're going to hear a lot of people say, the way we're going to solve this is the rich or whoever, however they frame them up, is going to pay their fair share. But at first glance, it may seem like that's appropriate. I want you to be careful with that, because when we take a step back, there's several ways to look at this. Do they need to pay their fair share as a percentage of their income, so in proportion to their income, or a fair share in a dollar amount? Which one are you talking about? Like, is a fair share, do you mean that everyone pays 15% of their income? Is that fair share? Or are you talking about like everyone pays the same dollar amount? Because we always obviously know the dollar amount makes it tricky, because then there's plenty of people that would have a hard time paying that. But when it comes to the percentages, I think a lot of people, when they say fair share, they're talking about the percentages, because the dollar amounts, if you look at the number, it's a disproportional amount of money that's being paid by the wealthy into the tax system. So you might say, well, that means there's too much wealth. That's another issue to resolve. That's not a lack of paying into the system. There's some other underlying conditions. But you're going to hear this fair share a lot. I think there's some sub questions to ask. The other thing that I like to think about is when you say paying your fair share, who are you paying it to? And we know that it's paying it to the government. And this is where we get very much fundamental, because our country was originally founded, we debated to establish our country, and are we going to have an English system or a French type governmental system? And then it kind of morphed into, are we going to have big government or less government? And we have not really moved from that debate even today. So when you say paying fair share, ultimately you're saying paying to the government. If you use that phrase, people start going, well, wait a minute. That means you're going to have government with more control. And do we really want that? That's where it gets really interesting, because what's your track record? I mean, if I were to evaluate investment, I'd say, what's your track record of being a good steward of the money I've given you so far? So this is where it gets really squirrely. And then some people would say, well, somebody's got to take care of the indigent and those that can't afford it. And I still suggest that the government's not the best to do that. And you say, well, who's going to do it? And I would say that the Christian community, they can do it. You just have to figure that out. And they're doing it now. And if you need evidence, you just have to do some little research. It doesn't take long. There's so much work being done by the Christian community to serve in an effective way those that need help. It would be my conviction that we as individuals gave more, not to the government, but directly to organizations that are effective in serving and getting people out of poverty. But that's a system issue. But the main thing I want to make clear to you is when you hear the word they need to pay their fair share, it is implying, and it's not a huge leap, that the government's going to have more control. That's a real problem. So let's talk about the subplots that exist in this next election that are not going to make a difference on who you vote for. They're just not, but they're subplots for you to know so that you can make good financial decisions because they will potentially personally impact you. So you're not going to make decisions on these subplots that I'm going to share with you. You're going to make decisions on, hopefully, who shares your values, who has the best vision for the future and the next generation, and you're not going to make decisions on who you like or who you don't like. You may subconsciously do that, but you're not supposed to. You're supposed to say who aligns best with my values and my convictions for our country. So you're going to see some peripheral arguments, but they're only peripheral. And that's what I'm going to talk about right now. But they're very important issues, but they're not going to be the deal maker or deal breaker for you. Let's unpack these 4 issues. It's all going to stem about some of the candidates are going to try to resolve all of these 4 issues with one simple phrase because they're intellectually dishonest. They don't know how to think about a critical way of resolving it in a different way. They're going to say, the way we resolve it is somebody else needs to pay their fair share. I want you to say that you're being intellectually dishonest. I want you to give me a better answer. And so I want to set aside that phrase, fair share, and make sure that you don't get captured by that one and think critically about these 4 issues. First of all, let's talk about just our personal income taxes. There's a lot of different stuff going on here that are interesting, one of which is Trump passed these tax cuts in 2017. They're going to expire at the end of 2025. There's going to be a lot of debate on how those continue or whether or not they continue. They affect you. I mean, think about it now. Your standard deduction is super high and the tax code was simplified. What I've found even personally is that there's some really good things in the tax code that you like. You just don't know you like them. You probably don't know Trump did it, but it's that higher standard deduction that has made a lot of our lives easier. So a peripheral thing, but are we going to let these tax codes expire? Or are we going to do something different? So that's going to be a peripheral debate. So be on the lookout for that. There's been talk about gas tax relief. You know, we pay about 18 cents a gallon extra for taxes for gas. And so there has been conversation about getting rid of that. A continued advancement towards a simplified tax code. And then, of course, there's going to be proposed. A lot of times they don't want to mess with the brackets because politically that's a landmine, but they like to mess with the deductions and the credits. So pay attention to some of that smoke and mirrors. It's really easy for the rich, and I'm using air quotes right now because I'm not sure what that means, for the rich to pay more in taxes and to do it by eliminating maybe a credit that they got or capping the ability to deduct certain amounts. Now, all I want you to do is be on the lookout for these things because it is smoke and mirrors. And you probably want to vote for somebody who's going to be truthful. And this might be a clue that they're not truthful. But at the end of the day, really, I don't think it's going to impact your vote. I really don't believe that. But I do think it'll give you some clues on how to prepare for your future retirement or even future inheritance. Which leads me to the next one, the inheritance tax. So this is number 2. In that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they really bumped up that inheritance tax quite a bit to about $26 million. So anything under $26 million wouldn't be subject to an estate tax. That'll go way back down. And so you got to pay attention to that one. In a lot of families, if you have an estate, you're thinking it's probably a good thing. But there's a lot of people out there that are land rich, that are farmers, that have big estates, that they don't have the money, the cash to pay that estate tax bill, which is due 9 months after the date of the second spouse's death. So it can be a real problem, this estate tax. And if it reverts back, then I think that's going to cause a lot of people to do some different types of planning. So we got to pay attention to what they're going to do with this in inheritance tax. Now, again, not a main issue, one of those subplots, but pay attention to that. So number 1, personal income tax. Number 2, inheritance tax. Well, let's pay attention to Social Security. If you don't do anything, doing nothing is a decision. So doing nothing is a decision with Social Security. And again, it's one of those intellectually dishonest. It's a weak posture to be in because Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 10 years. And you're absolutely weak if you don't resolve this. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Again, a lot of people are just going to say, have people pay their fair share. Again, please think a little bit better than this. One proposal by a 176-member House Republican study, and I think it had bipartisan support, was to move the Social Security age from 62 to 69. It's 67, but you can retire early at 62 and just keep moving that up. There's a number of different ways you can do that. That seems really logical to me, and they would probably do it on those that are in their 20s and 30s, so not people who are about to retire, so please don't worry about that. I think you can probably expect them somehow to have rich people, again, pay their fair share, so they'll have to pay more into Social Security. I definitely see that as a possibility. That would burden small businesses because small businesses match that Social Security. There's other creative ways to do this. And I know they're leaning into it, but like there's auto enrollment into 401k. So Americans are not so dependent upon Social Security. But this is tricky because there has not been any changes in the Social Security, not anything material since 1983. And our population is aging. The next generation isn't as big and the costs are just getting higher. You know, they've got this big trust fund that's going to run out of money in 10 years. They have been a poor fiduciary of investing that money. So they haven't invested it well. And that's a problem too. So that's something to consider as well, as being a little bit more, it's an element of stewardship with that money. So there's a lot of different creative ways that you can resolve Social Security, but doing nothing and having the rich pay their fair share are not only disingenuous, but intellectually dishonest. I'd like to see some more substance behind a strategy for Social Security, not necessarily for the generation that's receiving it or about to receive it, but for future generations. So definitely need to have a candidate talk about Social Security. So number one, individual taxes. I need to see what you're going to do there. Number two, estate tax. I know it doesn't mess with a lot of people, but we need to get some visibility on what that's going to look like. Number three, Social Security. What's the game plan there? This thing's going bankrupt in 10 years. How are you going to resolve it? And number four, the healthcare system. Namely, I'm going to touch on Medicare. Medicare is going to have some problems here soon. And they said about 8 years, that'll have some problems where the amount of money coming in, again, it's a population difference, but the amount of money coming in versus the amount paid out is only going to cover about 90% of what it's paying out now. And there's a lot of people dependent on Medicare. And frankly, Medicare is for our clients, because we use, people don't know this, but for our clients only, not for the community, for our clients only, we help them navigate the Medicare market and the Medicare supplement market. And it's a unique value that we bring to our clients. Once we navigate the Medicare market, it's generally a good system. But financially, the economics, it's not going to have enough money in 8 years. So there's got to be some resolve there. The population is not going to be able to support the current benefactors, and then take into consideration, praise God for modern medicine, but it's expensive to execute. And so you may get cancer treatment, but that's not cheap. And if Medicare is covering it, then that puts pressure on the system. So that has to get resolved. And we can't be haphazard about it. We've got to figure out a way to keep Medicare solvent. Again, that's a dangerous one because we're talking about a system that could expand government. So we've got to do it in a way that makes sense. And there's a lot of different factors to consider. You could say, oh, well, we just won't pay as much on treatment. Okay, fine. You don't pay as much on treatments, then doctors won't be in that business. You'll have fewer doctors, and there's just a ripple effect. Smart voters in this election will think about the indirect consequences of all of these decisions. So we are, in very essence, trying to hire a commander-in-chief that shares our values, but also has the ability to think critically and think about the indirect consequences of the decisions. And ultimately, we want somebody with good judgment. So obviously, we don't have oftentimes the candidates we want, but with what we've got to think through that lens of good judgment, good values. And when we hear these four issues, they are subplots of other bigger issues, but one that we need to pay attention to for personal planning. Again, in summary, these four subplots are the personal tax situation, and namely that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Number two, the inheritance tax. Number three, Social Security. And number four, the healthcare system, namely Medicare. Pay attention to those four things as we come into the election. I'll keep you abreast as I hear new things coming out. I hear about new proposals all the time. I'll keep you abreast of that. Stay tuned and be sure to share this with others in the community. And I think I told you guys just recently, but my book just came out. And so make sure you pick up that book on biblical responsible investing. You can get it at all of the major outlets, Barnes & Nobles and Amazon. So be sure to grab that book. As always, thanks for tuning in. And remember, you think different when you think long-term. Have a great day.